Everybody, Uneducated Economist doing this special live video this evening. I just got off of work doing bingo, doing my evening, Sunday evening bingo calling. But I wanted to do this video for you. I wanted to do it real quick. I don't know about real quick, but hopefully I'll do it quickly. Covering some of these questions that one of our viewers had, and he basically said that I never addressed these particular questions. So I figured, okay, well, let's address these questions right now. So I thought I'd do it here in this live stream. Now, a lot of times when I see people who have given me questions, a lot of times they will like form the question in a way that doesn't, like, to me, it doesn't seem applicable, right? But yet, the question still exists there, and so I have to answer it, right? So the first one was something like this. If the Fed hadn't printed, then would prices be up, down, or sideways? That was kind of the question that he asked. And he was basically saying if they hadn't printed over the last few years, would prices be up, down, or sideways? I mean, easy enough question. And I think to myself, it was just like, well, you're asking about the money printer and then the relationship to the prices, which most people end up doing. But I have a tendency to look at the supply chain of things, the supply side, supply demand imbalances and stuff like that. So when the question gets asked to me, it was just like, well, if the Fed hadn't printed, then would the money be up, down, or sideways, the price of everything? Well, I think to myself again, it was just like, so are we talking about over the last few years? Or are we talking all the way back to like the great financial crisis? Because had you asked me that question, say 3 years ago, it would totally have made sense that the prices didn't move up on account of the money printing from the great financial crisis, because the Federal Reserve failed to get their 2% inflation target that they were looking for, even though they had printed up, all that money, expanding the balance sheet by quadrupling it or something. Anyway, so again, I look at it, it was just like, so if you want to put the direct relationship to money expansion causes prices to go up, and then wash your hands of anything else that causes prices to go up, then it makes it very difficult to answer that question, right? So if they hadn't printed the money, would the prices be up or not, right? And it was just like, well, okay, yeah, sure. If they hadn't printed up the money, then we may not have seen the inflation that we had experienced over the last couple of years, but then again, we would not have had an inflation expectation that would go along with it, because all that money printing does create an inflation expectation, which then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to that particular question, right? So I can't answer it. I simply just can't do it, right? There's so much to think about and talk about when it comes to that particular topic. Did the money printing cause all the prices to go up, right? I mean, again, let's include a lot of other stuff into that. All right. So the next question, how is it that I could possibly just use lumber to be my main indicator of everything that's happening within the economy? All right. Now, I use lumber for a lot of my understanding of what is happening within the economy. I do that because I happen to be in the lumber industry. And now what I find interesting about lumber is that it's a pretty vital commodity to our life, right? I mean, it's pretty much what builds all homes, right? So lumber's a pretty critical commodity, and I know a lot about it. And I can see that there's a lot of parts to like agriculture, to distribution, to manufacturing, to all this stuff that you can look at from just the lumber industry that has all kinds of other indications within the economy. But then I also think, silver, oil, lumber, these are like 3 majorly vital commodities to human existence. And not one of those is more than 50% of their all-time high. I mean, I don't just look at lumber. I use lumber because I'm in the industry, right? That's how come I use lumber so much, is because I have so many views of that particular market that it makes it so much easier for me to understand what's going on in the economy when I just look at that, when I look at those particular parts of it. All right, next one. Fed used the pandemic. Did they cause it, or was it dumb luck? Because a lot of times when I talk about the Federal Reserve and how they were in a position in which that they were out of monetary policy, they were screwed. Like, they were going to have some major issues to deal with as far as the slowdown in the economy, the inflation falling. There was a lot of stuff that was taking place that was a major problem for the Federal Reserve. Like, I mean, here, hold on one second. Where is it? It's right here somewhere. It's from John Williams' speech, right? I mean, he says it right there. I don't know if I can read this or not. Today we face altogether different set of problems stemming from a very low neutral interest rate. This is the short-term real interest rate consistent with an economy operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation. Ironically, the problem we need to solve these days is the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. They solve the problem. They don't have the problem of inflation being persistently too low anymore. They needed to solve that problem. It's been solved, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons. People say that they lost control. They needed that occurrence to happen, right? And so when I think about, like, you know, that question, it was just like, did the Fed use the pandemic? Absolutely they did, but they could have used anything. It could have been a war, it could have been natural disaster, it could have been a financial crisis, but it happened to be the pandemic. It literally, they were in a position in which that they were going into crisis, and they said, okay, boys, we're going into crisis. What kind of crisis do we have? Oh, let's see here. We got natural disaster, war, financial. Here we go, pandemic. Oh, look at stimulus packages and stuff, right? There's no way they could have come up with all that stuff that they did instantaneously like that. They already had it planned. That's what I'm trying to say, is like they knew that this could happen, and they would not have had all this stuff that they could have done. All the special purpose vehicles, the stimulus packages, all the stuff. They did not just invent that overnight. Right? They had that planned and set up the entire time. There's very little doubt in my mind about that. So, yeah, I guess it was dumb luck. I mean, it was dumb luck. I mean, I don't know how to answer that question. Did they use it, cause it, or create it, or was it just dumb luck? I guess it was just dumb luck. Yeah. All right. Where did this is a good one, right? Where did the trillions of dollars go that got printed? Okay. So this was part of it. He was talking about, like, how all the, like, because I go into talking about how the demand for dollar is going to be out there for a while, and it could actually increase as the people actually try to get out of the dollar. This could create a situation in which that the dollar actually becomes stronger. And I know this is really hard for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around, because you think, man, if people are trying to get out of the dollar, then that would make the dollar weaker. There would be less demand for the dollar. But what ends up happening is that there's contracts written in dollars. They're due in dollars. These are nations that have written debts that have nothing to do with the United States, our government, our banks, our people, our corporations, nothing, right? But yet they wrote debts that are due in dollars, and Brazil happened to be one of them that I had talked about. Brazil has just recently issued out 10-year bonds, like their treasuries essentially, that are due in dollars. So for the next 10 years, Brazil's going to have to come up with dollars to pay these bonds back. How are they going to do that if they are not selling their product for dollars? How are they going to come up with those dollars? He made the suggestion that this could be a way to basically screw the people who have given them dollars by defaulting on them and saying, hey, we're not gonna pay you back in dollars, and in fact, we're gonna go ahead and switch it off into some other cryptocurrencies or something like that. I don't know exactly what I'm not trying to say that's what he was saying. I'm just kind of trying to remember how this was supposed to go down. But ultimately, if Brazil is writing out debts that are due in dollars and they decide that they're going to be like, screw it, I'm not paying these things back, do you realize, like, that is the worst possible thing that they could do for their own credit, for their own credit rating? I mean, it's like literally opening up their fly, grabbing a hold of their own unit and slicing it off if they do that. Like, I mean, it's literally, that's the same thing to say, I'm going to sell all these debts, but guess what? I'm not paying them back. Like, worst possible thing they could ever do. It's a confidence game, and they would lose all confidence right away. So there's no way that that's the plan, to default on that purposefully, right? They are taking out those debts because that is the cheapest debt that they could possibly take out, and everybody wants dollars. So if they want to do business with the world, they better have dollars to do it. I don't care how much they want to get out of the BRICS nation, or the BRICS nations want to get out of the dollar. All that stuff that you hear, just type in any one of those BRICS nations. I don't care if it's Brazil or India or South Africa, and then you write behind it dollar-denominated debt, and you're going to see that every one of these nations right now is taking out dollar-denominated debt. So, I mean, again, like, where did all this $1 trillion go? That ain't enough. It isn't enough to cover all the debts that are out there right now. Like, I doubt that the Federal Reserve could even print at a pace that is fast enough to cover all those debts, right? And even if they were paid, you would still need more money to cover the interest. So, yeah, no, there's like, that is one of the hardest concepts to try and wrap your head around, is that demand for dollar that exists outside of the United States. That is so, like, mind warping in a way. Once you get it, it makes a lot of sense, but it's hard to grasp that idea, and once you do, it's just like, oh crap, like, how could the dollar possibly fail when you have this many nations, this many people who are going to demand dollars, right? All right. Moving on. Liquidity crisis. What would that look like, right? And so I guess that basically, if it came down to it where Brazil couldn't make their payments because there's just not enough liquidity out there or enough dollars out there to try to acquire to pay those debts. I think that's kind of like the idea behind this. Well, it's essentially whatever happens when you don't pay your debts, right? I mean, you think about it, there's collateral out there for somebody, for somewhere. Hey, those are my ports, those are my power plants, those are my, mineral rights, whatever, right? Collateral ends up coming into play. So yeah, liquidity crisis is a bad deal. Or people just simply or you take a loss. Like, it's either you get the collateral or you lose it all. Right? Take a loss. All right. What does debt jubilee, all right, look like? This is one that I think is just as comical as can be. If everyone canceled their debts, why does the debt need to be owed, right? Who would the debt need to be owed to? A debt jubilee, completely delusional, will not happen. Like, I don't know where it is that, like, I mean, I could understand maybe if you're taking like ancient times when we had hard currency and all these debts were out there and there's no way that everybody's going to pay those debts and you have to relieve the obligation to it. Like, I could see some sort of like possibility of that from ancient times, right? But nowhere, anywhere, at any time, out of everything that I have ever studied, would I ever consider a debt jubilee to be a real thing, ever, right? I mean, that's basically a debt jubilee is where all debts are just like dissolved, like nobody owes anything anybody. Now, that ain't gonna happen. Like, I don't even try to like conceptualize that or to try and like, entertain the thought of it, because it's such a far off concept that it's just not gonna happen. What would happen if people didn't pay? Like, what would happen if all the debts disappeared and nobody owed anybody anything, right? Who would it be owed? Think about this, right? Think about this for just a second. Retirement plans are all somebody else's debt obligations. Okay? All of it. They're either like government debts or corporate debts or mortgage debts or somebody else's debt. They're almost always. So if you say, hey, we're going to just alleviate all debts, nobody's going, all the old people who are sitting on pensions, they don't get anything, right? They don't get all this stuff. They go right on onto the streets, right? Because they're reliant on somebody else's obligations, somebody else's debts for their retirement. So that's a major problem that they would face. One of the things that I find, and it's kind of interesting, I'm moving on to the next questions. I hope you guys are enjoying this video, but it was just a list of questions that I thought, man, I really should address these things. Like, this is another one. Recently, I've had more than one person accuse me of being like, or just kind of saying that I sound like a Fed apologist. Like, I'm on the Fed's side. Like, I'm trying to defend the Federal Reserve. I can really care less about the Federal Reserve. I could really care less about fiat systems. I would much rather us be all on a gold standard because I understand how business cycles work, and I would definitely participate in that kind of economy. But it's not up to me. And I'm not like one to say, hey, this is the way it should be, or this is why it's so bad, or anything else like that. It's not like I can care less about any of that stuff. What I want to truly understand is what is happening here so I can position myself for the most appropriate way I can. I mean, that is ultimately what I am doing. I can care less about the Federal Reserve, right? I can care less about the banking system. I can care less about government, right? However, understanding their system, understanding their strategies, and trying to participate in a way that I feel is best appropriate for me means that I cannot say that they are doing it wrong or right. Like, I can't say it either way. All I can say is this is the way that they are doing it. 2% over time, right? I was accused of some sort of brilliance. Like, this is some sort of brilliance coming out of the Federal Reserve. Like, this is a direct question, like, statement to this gentleman. I was just like, how in the world does a 2% average inflation rate over time, and understanding that that is the Federal Reserve's monetary policy or position strategy, how is that like some sort of like accusation of brilliance coming from them? Like, I never said it was brilliant. I never thought it was brilliant. I never thought it was a good idea or a bad idea. I just said that's the way it is, and how people are mistaken by their 2% target, and that they should be looking at a 2% average inflation rate over time, whatever that is, because they don't really tell us exactly how they can configure that inflation rate over time. And then when you consider, like, they change the metrics of it, it doesn't really make sense at all, and it all becomes arbitrary to the Federal Reserve anyway, right? However, if you look at their own statements, it's not a 2% target. It's a 2% average inflation rate over time, which means that everybody who is looking at inflation coming down to the 2% is misguided, because they are not looking at a 2% target. It's a 2% average inflation rate over time. So we have to listen to the Fed's words when they come out saying what they see happening within inflation, because it's not what we all think. Or not what a lot of people think anyways. I mean, I know what I'm thinking about it. So anyhow. Oh, moving on. All right. Why is deflation bad? Like, this is another one. It was just like, did I ever say that deflation is a bad thing? Ever? Like, I don't think deflation is bad. I don't think inflation is bad. I don't think either one of these is a good or bad thing. It's just an is, right? Is it deflation or is it inflation? I mean, if it's deflation, then hey, man, you're probably pretty excited about being able to make purchases in the future, get those assets at a better price. If it's inflation, you're probably pretty excited because you're going to see your asset prices go up. What position are you in? Right? Good or bad doesn't mean anything to me when it comes to this, to the economy. I mean, it's just is, and you have to position yourself in the most appropriate fashion you can. So why is deflation bad? It's not bad. It's not good. It just is. All right? And you have to look at it that way and position yourself to be in that, appropriate way. Like, you're thinking, man, oh, geez, this is horrible. Look at all this deflation taking place. Oh, this is bad. Well, why is it horrible? Why did you position yourself to be hurt by deflationary scenarios instead of taking advantage of them if they were to come? Right? This is the way you have to think about things. This is the way I think about it anyway. All right. How long are we into this? All right. I'm going to try and keep this under a half an hour if I can. I'm almost done here too, guys. All right. Why don't we print our own money? Great question, man. Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution says that no state shall coin anything but gold and silver as illegal tender in payment of debt. The entire Federal Reserve is basically illegal. It's unconstitutional. It shouldn't even be there in the first place, right? So why don't we, right? Why don't we use gold and silver? It's because it created so much damn boom and bust cycles that was destroying the people, and JP Morgan, the man, was tired of bailing out the nation, and they got all their fancy bankers together to say, hey, let's create an elastic money supply so when the business cycle heats up, we won't run out of cash and we can continue on operation like we normally do, and when things slow down, we'll pull that money back out. This is the same story I've said so many times, right? The Federal Reserve was not it's not a friend, right? They're not a good or a bad thing. They were created to try and keep that elastic money supply so that we wouldn't have the booms and bust cycles. It's screwed up. It's a screwed up system. It's gotten away from them, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that it's going to destroy the world, right? Like a lot of people are going to say out there, but it does have the potential to destroy the world. So it's easy to see the fear that's within that, right? And I get it. Like, I mean, there was a time when I was very fearful of the whole thing. I've decided that I'm not going to live in fear, because living in fear doesn't give you any possibility of being in a growth position, right? So living in fear is very counterintuitive to progression. So you can't live in fear. You have to live in understanding, and that's what the whole point of this, everything that I do is, right? Okay, let's see here. Dual mandate failed. How do they justify their existence? Now, I don't see how it failed. I mean, they have a dual mandate. There's no way that they could keep that consistent, right? If they could keep things consistent, like perfect all the time, perfect doesn't exist. There's no such thing as perfect. The moment that you have achieved perfect, you will be in a position of trying to maintain perfect, which then says that perfect is not perfect within itself if it has to be maintained. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as perfect, right? There's only the attempt to try and acquire that ability to be perfect, right? Almost perfect. So that's ultimately what comes down to a mandate from the Federal Reserve. They're mandated to do two things: low and stable prices and full employment. I feel that that is a lot of what the Federal Reserve is attempting to do. Like, you look at their speeches, you look at their actions, you look at their words, you look at everything that they do, they have a tendency to be in a position in which that they are trying to achieve that. Full employment and low and stable prices. If those are not occurring, they adjust monetary policy to try and meet that position. I get it, that during that, the rich get incredibly rich and the poor get poor, right? They separate the classes when this happens. I know. Like, I see it happening. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It just is, and you need to be able to position yourself for that. Right? Okay, last one, and this is my favorite one. Who owns the Fed? I don't know. I don't know who owns the Fed. It's the big banks. They're all shareholders of the Fed. They all participate in their Fed decisions. They all throw themselves around, from working at the Fed to working at Goldman Sachs to working at the Treasury to doing all these positions, and they're all buddies, and they're all like, cartel kind of thing. I don't know how to say it, but that's ultimately what it comes down to. Who owns the Fed? The big banks do. The shareholders who own them. It's the richest families who own them. I mean, who knows? It's a secret society who owns them. I don't know. Like, nobody knows who owns the Fed, right? And so you think about the people who are in charge of it. Who knows, right? Those are the families that, appoint these people. I mean, I can't, like, what am I going to just come up with all these conspiracy theories on all this stuff? You can go and research all the people who work at the Fed. You can research their history. You can see where they went to school, who they've worked for in the past. You can see all this stuff. And I mean, I've looked at it like, these people, they grew up, right? I mean, people knew them when they were growing up. They went to school with each other. They all remember each other. It's not like they just popped them out of some cave and said, okay, now you hold this position, and, you're some sort of secret, entity to our success here, something like that. I mean, I don't get it. Like, these people do work in an operation of networking within themselves. Like, I get that part of it. Most likely, people like us will never work for the Federal Reserve. We will never hold the position at Goldman Sachs. We will never be in a spot in which that we're an advisor, that we could get the information that we need in order to conduct ourselves in a way that makes us filthy fucking rich. Like, that won't happen, right? But understanding it, like, just knowing it, right? It doesn't mean that we have to look at the Federal Reserve and say there's some sort of evil entity. If you do that, then guess what? You will be fighting evil. Everything that you do will then therefore be in a position in which that I am trying to conquer this entity that is coming after me, and I have to fight it, right? Believe me, you will not advance doing that, right? Understanding that they might be a pain. They might do things that are frustrating. They might do things that are, like, against what it is that I feel that needs to happen. But I know how to conduct myself in a way that is most appropriate, because I'm not a wishful thinker of what it is that they should be. I just feel of what it is that they do and best conduct myself appropriately for that. And that's really what this is all about. Like, if you're enjoying this live stream, I got 195 people watching right now, which is blowing me away for a Sunday evening. But we got 195 people watching right now. I mean, if you really enjoy this live stream that we're having right now, where we're breaking down some of this stuff, if you wanted to ask questions, consider joining the channel, becoming a member of this channel, because you will be able to access more questions to me during live streams like this. Right now, we have comments that are just flying through the screen. I mean, I see them coming right now. I'm going to go and look at some of those right now. But you're going to be able to get with a community that is going to answer these questions for you, who's going to be able to, break some of this stuff down to make it easier for you to, like, even just engage in conversation. Like, sometimes it's just like, man, I don't really have much going on. I'm not looking to invest. I'm not looking to start businesses. I'm not looking at any of that stuff. But it would be really nice to actually sit in a room and engage in a conversation with people when they are talking about economics. This is the channel for you. This is the type of stuff that we need, that you would need in your life. We go through and break this stuff down so that people can understand it in a way that is most appropriate for them. Wow, 200 people watching right now. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here this evening. I mean, look at this, 93 likes right now. You guys are kicking it. I so appreciate it. Let me go up to the very top here and just look at the... Wow, there were so many comments. Okay. Good evening. All right, got some of the leader. Hola, great to see you tonight. Well, great seeing you here. Hello, UE. All right. Can't wait to see you in Vegas. Yeah, I'll be in Vegas. What is it? February 17th and 18th. So if you haven't checked that out yet, you're close to Vegas, you got some time, consider going to Mike Zuber's 50,000 subscriber YouTube channel party that he's throwing. I'm going to be the keynote speaker there. So, I mean, come down and check out Vegas and check out the Uneducated Economist over at the Mike Zuber's one rental at a time, 50,000 channel YouTube or 50,000 subscriber YouTube channel party. What do we have here? Interesting setting. Where are you? Oh, okay. So, right there, that is what they refer to as the Barbie Center. This is like the original train depot, right? Where I guess everybody would catch the train. The Maritime Museum now has it, and they use it for different events and stuff like that they have going on. So it's pretty cool. It's actually a neat little spot right here. And the reason why I pick it is because of all the lights that they have around here. So. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Hey, Hyder. All right. I feel like you're about to step out of your car and enter into a second fighting game. Or a 2D. Oh, a 2D fighting game. Sorry. Hey, Josh. All right. It's midnight Eastern time. Yeah. What do you guys? You guys are all up and watching. This is cool. All right. Great evening, Hyder. All right, this stream, people. Oh, thumbs up the stream, people. Yes, please do. Crypto Beauty. All right, Richard, good to see you here, my friend. All right, pump up those likes. Yes, please do. Printing money also devalues their own debt, or at least their old debt. They're still doing it. Yeah, and that's going to be something that goes on forever. Like, you can look at, I don't know how many people earned $1 in 1913 and then are trying to spend that dollar today. I don't know how many people are doing that. I don't think anybody. And so when I hear that argument, well, $1 in 1913 would buy this much, and now it doesn't, it only buys that much. And I'm thinking, well, you didn't earn no $1913. You didn't earn a $1913. I mean, you might have. I don't know how old you are, but probably not, right? It's probably most of those people are nowhere in existence anywhere. So when I hear that argument, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, you're right. But then again, the dollar is not meant to be used as a store of value. It's meant to transfer, right? Transfer from one space to another. Your work to a commodity, your efforts to a service, from, whatever. It's meant to be a transfer, not meant to be a store of value. Now, people look at it and say, no, it used to be a store of value when we were back on the gold standard. Okay, well, that's true. But we're not on a gold standard, so we're not talking about a gold standard anymore. And so therefore, you can't expect it to hold its value like it once did. So the argument of well, it used to do this back in the day and now it only does this today. It's just to me, it's just well, that I throw that out the window right now. It's just like, okay, I know that the dollar is not going to store value. Like, I just know it's not going to. But there are times in which that the dollar will buy more than it does when the time that you earned it, right? Dollar strength goes up and down. So now when you're in a position in which you're thinking, man, there's a liquidity crisis on the horizon. I mean, the quantitative tightening that has taken place is reeling in the dollars, right? They're pulling the dollars out of the economy. At some point, somebody's going to be looking for dollars that they won't be able to find. And they are going to want those dollars to pay their debts back. And they are going to be willing to give up a lot for them, right? That's strengthening of the dollar. I want to be in a position in which that I could take advantage of that. And just having the mind of like, well, the dollar had lost all this value since 1913 would then eliminate that strategy. It would say you can't hold on to dollars at all, ever. Just look at what happened since 1913. Don't hold on to your dollars. But there's a liquidity issue coming. And I might be able to take advantage of that and buy a lot of cheap stuff when everything goes on sale. So what strategy should you take? Right? The one that says the dollar is worthless and doesn't store value and has been deteriorating since 1913. And you're going to be like, okay, well, we can set all that stuff aside for just a minute because here in a few months, I'm going to be picking up my assets. Right? I mean, this is like, how do you want to think about it? You know, what kind of meaning? All right. Let's see here. How are you, my friend? I am good. How are you guys? You guys are all kicking ass, I'm sure, just like everybody should be. All right. Howdy from Canada. All right. East Coast or West Coast? Hey. West Coast, okay. Also Canada. All right. Alberta, my friend. All right. A lot of Canadians in here tonight. Right on. If interest, oh, here we go. God, I don't have my glasses. Do I have glasses? Shoot. All right, I don't have any glasses in here. Okay. If interest rates had returned up a few years after GFC, the world would probably be a better place today if it fit. Okay, well, if you don't remember, we actually did have we had a taper tantrum and we had the autopilot program. All right, so you remember, like, it was, I think they started the autopilot program, like, I can't remember, what was it, 2016, 17, something like that? And they were raising the interest rates a quarter point every quarter without, like, just like, blindly, like, hey, this is what we're doing, autopilot, doesn't matter, whatever's going on in the economy, it's going up a quarter point every quarter, no matter what. And so they did that all the way up until they got it up to about 2.5%. And that's like was in 2019. Everything was like going to hell. Like nothing was going right. And everybody knew that there was a recession on the way. We all were talking about it. Like every single YouTuber, economist, news, everybody was talking about the recession coming in, towards the end of 2019. COVID hit and it got blamed on that. The COVID-induced recession. And I mean, like, everybody's like, what do you mean COVID-induced recession? This was coming no matter what, right? But it all got blamed on COVID instead and saying, like, as if there was no issues prior to that. Now, the Federal Reserve had interest rates, their Fed funds rate up around 2.5% and had already started lowering them going into 2020 prior to COVID kicking in. So, yeah. All right. So they hadn't returned to normal, but they were definitely, trying to get there. Turn off the news and media and your despair will go away. Yeah, the mainstream media is a terrible place to try and get information from. For one, they're always late, right? I knew this from the lumber. Like, I didn't realize how late most mainstream news is until, like, the information about lumber was coming out. And I'm thinking, geez, you guys are talking about this like it just happened this week, and I've been talking about it for months, right? So a lot of times the news media outlets are very far behind on their information. All right. Also, hi, Simon. All right, let's see here. Why do you call them credible threats? Well, okay, so the credible threat theory is really just, it's my own interpretation of forward guidance, signaling, what else do they call it? Jawboning, right? This is their words. This is what they say. They use signaling. They use forward guidance. This is what they say that they're doing. To me, like, I look at that and I say that's a credible threat. Like, you are establishing the definite possibility of what it is that you plan on doing into the future, right? And by doing that, you can get the markets to react just simply off of using your words. Now, that makes it a credible threat. We are going to lower interest rates into the future. They didn't promise that. They just put out the narrative out there and everybody ran with it, right? That's the credible threat. Now people feel that the possibility of the Fed lowering interest rates is so valid, right, that they are willing to now participate in a way that says, I want my retirement funds to do this, and my business and my house purchase and all this other stuff based on this idea of lowering interest rates that was never part of the Fed. That was never part of the Fed's statement or even plans going into the future, right? But the possibility of it, the credible threat of it alone is enough to move the markets, right? And so that's why I call it the credible threats. It's not, they're not threatening you like, hey, we're going to stab you with a knife or something like that. It's not a threat like that. It's just, it's just them using the guidance. They're like, hey, if we tell them what we're about ready to do, then they might act in a way then which we don't really even have to do anything. I mean, they even said it like, using the forward guidance added an extra 0.5 percentage point to the Fed funds rates, right? Before they even, what am I trying to say? The forward guidance gave them the effect within the banking system as if they had raised rates, right? They were able to have the same thing take place within the banking system from them raising rates, but they didn't even have to do it, just simply by giving them perception that they were going to do it. Boom, it starts to happen, right? Credible threats is by far their biggest tool that the Fed uses. The adjustment of interest rate policies and bank reserves and how to, all the Fed system, yeah, that's all a lot. That's really important, very, detailed when it comes to the mechanics of it. But their jawboning, their forward guidance, the signaling, the credible threat is by far the most powerful tool that they have, right? And it works really, really well right now. All right. It was planned 100%. I mean, I'm not one to say it. I'm not one to say that it was planned, because this is the thing. I have gone through so many conspiracy theories in my life. Like, there was a time when I dove deep into some deep rabbit holes, right? All those crazy conspiracy things that you have ever thought about or read or heard about coming from the government are real. All of them. Like, pretty much all of them. Right? So there's no doubt in my mind that the conspiracies that are out there are real. Okay? Now, I don't need proof. I mean, I've already done the research and stuff like that to say, okay, these things happen, right? So I don't need to look right here. Here's the proof, the evidence of it. I mean, yeah, they do it, right? So I don't look at it like that anymore, right? I don't look at it like, hey, they did it on purpose. Guess what, right? No. What I do is I just step back for just a minute and I say, okay, well, this is what is occurring, right? Regardless of who caused it or forced it or whatever, right? This is what is occurring. There's a pandemic. There is a bailout system taking place. There is special purpose vehicles that were set up. These credible threats have definitely caused a lot of market participation in different directions, right? Without the Federal Reserve's actions. I can just look at that and to say, objectively look at it and to say, these things are occurring. Like, whether or not it was this person's fault or that was the reason or whatever, none of that shit matters, right? What matters is that it's happening, right? Those guys are in this position. They're raising their interest rates. They're using these stimulus packages. They're doing all this other stuff. This is occurring. It doesn't matter to me why, right? I mean, it does matter why, but to look at it objectively, it's like being in the boat that's sinking, right? Same analogy that I've used there, right? It doesn't really matter who put the hole in the boat, Right now, we need to figure out how it is that we're going to get this water out of the boat and get the boat to shore. Right? That's the more important thing, not what's causing this hole. Right? I mean, that doesn't matter. The boat's sinking. We can figure out what caused the hole later. Right? Same thing with like, the pandemic. Like, did they cause it or not? It was just like, who cares if they caused it? It occurred. Right? And they used that. Right? Whether it was war or natural disaster or anything else. Man, we got a lot of people up in here. 230 people. This is amazing. With 230 people and 128 likes, let's get that up to 200 likes like in the next few minutes here. So everybody who's watching this right now, go hit that like button. And we got some super chats rolling in too, man. Thank you so much, guys. You're always so supportive of the channel. I can't appreciate it any more than I can't tell you how much I appreciate it any more than I do, Wow, look at all these comments. Incredible. Okay, what a great stream tonight. There we go. There they are. Okay, Infamous NYC, thank you so much for the $5. All right. Decided to diversify into Mexico for retirement. I do investments heavily in market, but I'll keep my family in Mexico and start business there plus home. Yeah, I would consider Mexico. I mean, for sure. I mean, I think Mexico is it's a beautiful place to be. I vacationed there several times, but still, like, living expenses are low. If you can have some income going in, I mean, I think Mexico is a great place to go to. All right. Infamous NYC for another $5. Was watching Canadian Prepper, and their guest was talking about the banning of gas-powered cars or EVs. What are your thoughts on this topic? Well, what are they going to do? They're going to ban the production of them, right? So now you won't be able to buy new vehicles that run on gas, because that's ultimately what they can do. They can't ban, like, say, hey, man, you got to get rid of your car, right? I mean, it's my car. This is the only thing I have, right? I mean, you can't tell me that I got to get rid of my transportation. They can't necessarily do it that way. They can stop the sale of new vehicles that are running on gas. Okay, so we can look at it like that way. I'm cool with it because I don't buy new cars anyway. I buy old cars. And in my personal strategy, I'm buying cheap old cars that run on fuel, run on gas, that are fuel efficient. And I'm going to park those things. Like, I'm going to run through them. Like, I may never have a brand new car in my life ever again. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm accepting of that. I mean, if I make $1 million or whatever, then I might consider going buying a new vehicle. But at this point, I have bigger things that I need to deal with. Mainly, I need to figure out what it is I'm going to do for retirement, right? So if that is the case, if they do stop the production of gas-powered vehicles, then I would only assume that all the gas-powered vehicles that are in existence, especially if you had them good, maintained, and running, are going to start going up in value. Less people will be purchasing fuel, right? Because they're going to be running on electricity and not gas, right? So less people will be buying fuel. That means to me that the fuel costs are probably going to end up coming down with less demand for it, right? So supply and demand. Obviously, we have a very well-established fuel production network within the entire globe, so I can't imagine that disappearing overnight. But the fuel cost itself, I could see come down if there's more people driving electric vehicles, which would then make those vehicles even more of a price. So not only will they go up in price because of that, but then also the fuel efficiency of those vehicles, or just the cost of transportation, would probably come down as well. That's what I'm thinking on it. So I'm collecting the old vehicles for that purpose. And, if I never own another new vehicle, then so be it. Thank you so much for the $5 or the $10 there. Infamous NYC, you're very supportive of the channel. Thank you. Okay, why do you think there's going to be a liquidity crisis? Okay, that's a really good question, because I wouldn't have necessarily just kind of assumed that there would be a liquidity crisis. But there's a couple of things that are taking place within the statements, not only coming from the Federal Reserve, but the Treasury. And then also you can kind of see things happening from like the global point of view as well. So let's just kind of take it down from, like, the Fed is going into quantitative tightening, right? Quantitative tightening means that they are pulling in Okay, quantitative easing is when they print money. They don't really print it, but like they print money and they buy a treasury. They buy a U.S. government bond. When that bond comes due, right, or is allowed to roll off the balance sheet, when that means is that when it comes due, they don't take that money that comes back from the sell or from the bond itself. You get the principal and the interest payment, roll that over into another bond. The Fed doesn't do that. Quantitative tightening means when that bond comes due, they pull that money back out of the system. So the printed money that bought the bond is now coming back to the Federal Reserve, and they are not buying another bond with that, right? So this is quantitative tightening, which is now reducing the amount of money that's in the circulation out there, the M2 money supply. It's a big deal right now. I mean, M2 money supply hasn't shrank this much since like the Great Depression or something, right? I forget exactly what the stats are on that. And so you think about it, if you're reeling in that money, that is going to reduce the amount of dollars that are available out there. Those dollars, that's the liquidity, right? That's what makes things move. If you want to pay a contract, if you want to buy something, you want to make, a transaction, it's the dollars that makes things flow. So liquidity is when like the bond market goes to make a sale, like you have a bond that you want to sell off and you can't find a buyer for it, now that bond is not a very liquid market, right? Meaning that you can't just get in and out of it. So liquidity drying up means that bond market starts having issues, or maybe home sales have issues, trying to, operate within commerce itself, like the transactions that are happening out there start to slow down because there's just not as much dollars out there to perform the transactions that are needed. Even though you think about it, it's like there's billions and trillions and quadrillions of dollars that are everywhere out there. Yes, that is true. But the access to credit is really what then starts to create the situation in which that we are now experiencing, and that these bonds that have been issued, right, are going to come due. And that's where the liquidity is going to be in high demand, right? To make sure that those bonds get paid. Now, that's coming from like just the Federal Reserve part of things, right? From what they are saying, the quantitative tightening, the issues that they are, facing within the balance sheet reduction. And then on top of it, they have also made statements to the big banks out there to say, hey, check out your balance sheet. Make sure you are in a position that if liquidity ever you know, comes into a difficult position, that your balance sheet can handle that. They have made these statements to the big banks, right? So now the Treasury, they made an announcement, 6, 7, 8 months ago. And if you go and just Google Treasury bond buyback program, and you're going to see and hit the news feed too, so you can look at some of the articles. And you're going to find that a few months ago, the Treasury stated like there is going to be some issues coming into 2024, and we are going to be in a position to buy back those bonds if there ever comes a time that somebody goes to sell one and there's nobody buying it, right? And now you have to think this is not necessarily for the individual person. They're probably talking directly to the primary dealers, like the big banks out there. If they ever had an issue with one of their, like a position within the maturity of their bond markets, didn't find the liquidity that they're looking for, and basically they can't sell or buy a particular treasury just instantaneously. If those big banks have issues, then it starts bleeding into the rest of the economy. However, if you can maintain the liquidity within those big banks, then the rest of the market will probably just function just fine. So the bond buyback program is probably just to deal with those primary dealers to make sure that the bond market stays liquid. However, making that announcement is not something that should be taken lightly. It's just like, well, they didn't say that so that it wouldn't occur, right? I mean, they made that statement and then went hush about it so that the people who should truly know about it will then have it in their mind that they definitely have this possibility coming in the future. Nobody's talking about that, right? Nobody talks about the bond buyback program. I mean, I guess some people do, but I rarely ever see it within the mainstream media or the news outlets that that come across my feed. So yeah, like, to me, like that's the reason why I see the liquidity crisis. But then on top of it, those contracts that are out there, right? You know, you think like how many do really exist? Nobody really knows. I don't even think the Fed knows, right? And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they print up as much money as they do at the times, to make sure that people understand that there is a lot of liquidity out there and that these contracts are going to get paid and that they don't just start freezing up, right? I know this is like, I'm really talking kind of in a lot of circles here, but you think about it, if you have a situation in which that contracts, like, just take like Chinese government contracts or something like that. If they don't get paid, if those Chinese contracts, those treasuries, those bonds, if they do not get paid in dollars, like the dollar denominated debt that they had issued, the contagion effect that comes from that starts spilling over into other parts of the economy, and that is something that nobody really has any control over and may not be able to see how it's set up, like how the dominoes would fall if this particular bond was to default, or the credit default swaps that would kick in from that. These things are very complicated. It's really hard to wrap your head around. But once you start seeing that, if that starts to fall, those dominoes, the liquidity crisis could just grow so massive, so quick that it would make your head spin, right? I mean, it's almost impossible to describe it, and they are planning massive blackouts. Okay. That's why they are pushing for all electric vehicles, cars. Okay. You'll be completely centralized for all appliances. It matters who put the hole in the boat if they are about to put another hole in the same boat. Okay. I mean, that's true. So we could sit around arguing about who's putting holes in the boat. What happens next? Do we sink? I mean, I'm tired of arguing about who's putting holes in the boat, right? If they put holes in the boat, right, I'm going to have to understand that I need a life vest, right? If they're going to continue to put holes in the boat, I'm going to have to figure out to make sure that shore might be possible enough for me to swim. Right? I understand that. I know the position that I'm in right now. I'm not waiting for somebody that's like, hey man, we got to vote for somebody who's going to come and fix this problem. You think that's going to happen? Like, I mean, if you ain't planning on fixing the problem yourself or dealing with the problem yourself, figuring out a way to be preserving your own self, right? Like, I look at that hole in the boat and I'm thinking, well, shit, if I have a life preserver on, that's a lot like holding silver. Now, granted, silver is an anchor when you're thinking about being out in water, but when I think about protecting myself from the third party of the banking system or governments or anything else like that, having silver in my hand makes me feel a whole lot better about the situation. All right. See, again, like, the hole in the boat, yeah, that's gonna be a problem, right? But I got the other things in my life that are gonna hopefully deal with a lot of the problems that the hole in this boat is creating. Okay? Like, again, it's all about figuring this stuff out for yourself. I don't want to blame anybody. Like, the moment that you start blaming somebody else for the problems that you have, that's an external blame, right? And I know I have blamed a lot of stuff in my life on externals, and this is what I found. I figured that thing out, got that external problem, that problem fixed. Guess what? Other problems keep coming up because it's always some external problem going on out there. I never realized, there's where the real problem is. It's not out there, it's right here, right? See, I can't blame external things out there for my problems that I have. And not to mention, like, there's no way that I could vote for somebody or have somebody in charge or be a leader out there who says, man, we are going to condition everything within the world and the economy and everything to benefit Simon. Right? Because, I mean, there's all these other people who live in a different situation. And, I mean, we can't do it for everybody. So, but we can do it for just Simon. Like, I mean, it ain't going to happen that way. Never will it. So, no, I don't blame anybody. And if you, like, even if the government or banking system or something else is shooting holes in the boat, right? I mean, if that's the case, don't you want to get into crypto or something, or figure out another system in which that you can do transactions with? I mean, to me, I mean, it's like, wow, You guys are blowing some holes in the boat, aren't you? Yeah, I'm out. I mean, I'm not going to deal with that. I mean, I'm going to figure out another way. And you'll rely on the move and more. You will rely on them more and more. I get it. Hello, Simon. No, you don't need to figure out why the boat's sinking. You need to figure out why you haven't built your own boat. That's it. There you go. That's a much better way of looking at it. All right. Hi from Fontana, California. All-nighter. That would be one of my goals. I can check off the list. Really want to meet George. He has helped inspired and helped educate me over the last few years. So grateful. Talking about George Gammon. George Gammon is about the coolest person you could ever meet. If you ever get a chance to go up and talk to George or meet George, you definitely take your opportunity to do that. The guy is just like, it's so funny. Like, I couldn't believe George gave me the opportunity to go and speak at the Rebel Capitalist. And you know what was crazy about it is that he never asked me anything about what I was going to talk about. He didn't ask to like review any of my presentation. He didn't ask any of that stuff. He had complete faith in me. I couldn't believe it. He was like, "Okay, bro, it's your turn. Here's the mic. Go up there and go do your thing." Right? And I'm like, holy moly. Like, I mean, I could have gone up there and just bombed or said anything I wanted. I could have been like, "Hey, don't listen to this guy. All these people are crazy." Right? I mean, I could have said anything I wanted. He had no clue. And that's how much trust he actually gave into me to put me up on stage at that big ass event in front of all those people. And I said, "Here, man, go for it." George is cool. George is so cool, man. He's the best. And his whole crew, like everybody who works for George is cool as hell too. I mean, everybody is awesome there. George is just like you would expect too. Super cool and engaging, Waiting for the rapture to resolve the HTE supply side. All right, I need a new motorcycle. A new motorcycle would be fun. I've been talking to my boy about it. I rode a little bit when I was a kid, and I think, man, that would be fun to have. Is just to have a bike to go ride around on sunny days or something like that. I like old cars too. It lets mechanics have less headaches. My next car will be an EMP-proof 50-year-old all analog pickup. There you go. All right. Hey, thank you very much, B Dan82 for the dollar super sticker. That's very cool of you. All right, Hyder, amazing hearing. That motivates me even more to want to go LOLs, my secret YT crush. Don't tell anyone. All right, sorry, but you're dead wrong, as they already banned producing new gas small engines in California for certain applications. What am I dead wrong about? Like, I understand that they're banning new stuff. I'm talking about old things, like the old vehicles. Like, I get it, like they have smog emissions and all that other stuff going on in California. Now, I'm not in California. Right? I'm not trying to make up rules or ideas or try to figure out how it is that I'm going to live in California. I don't live there, right? So I'm doing things that are best positioned for me and where I'm living, and I get to drive old cars like this one and the other ones that I have. And I see other old cars for sale. Now, there could come a time in which hey, you're going to experience the same thing that's going on down in California, but I'm not there yet, right? So I'm not going to imagine something that doesn't exist, to conduct my life. I could go with what ifs all day long. Like I mean, I drink a lot of coffee. I can have the anxiety too, and I can go into the what ifs all day long, right? But that's not what I'm going to do. Like, I mean, this is the position that I'm in, and it seems to be working out pretty well for me. Let's see here. Thanks, B. Dan. All right. Cuba, have we come? Did you hear Ford is shutting down their EV production? Yeah, I did. I heard that they couldn't really keep up with what was it? What was the reason behind it? They couldn't keep up with the demand that was going out, or not the demand. The demand wasn't keeping up with their production or something. I can't remember exactly what the reason was. But I saw that, and that doesn't really surprise me. Like I figured there was going to be a fairly big dramatic slowdown in production of vehicles over 2024. Like I could just see that happening, not just with Ford, but with like all vehicles. You know, just simple facts of, you know, like when just like any bull, like when I think about the bullwhip effect hitting just about anything, when you have a gap in production happening, you end up going into an overproduction, prices are up, and then there's a fall in production that ends up happening because there's no demand due to the high prices that are existing. Then eventually inventory depletes, and then you have growth that starts to come from it again. So, yeah, anyway. Okay, we're almost up to that 200 mark. We got 209 people with 180 likes. We're almost there, guys, to that 200 mark. All right. How about we put our feet down and not let them ban gas vehicles? How do you do that? Like, how do you prevent them from banning gas vehicles outside of everybody demonstrating together to the point that they vote those people out? Like that doesn't happen that way. I mean, I've seen some stuff happen, but for the most part, once that like that motion has been made, like they start moving in that direction, that momentum is very difficult to reverse. So, like banning gas vehicles or banning the idea of like eliminating the ban to gas vehicles, I don't think is going to be in the cards, right? However, I think the production of gas vehicles is going to continue anyway. Like, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are producing electric vehicles, but then there's going to be somebody out there as well who is producing gas powered vehicles. And unless they absolutely make it illegal to import or produce or have or anything like that, I think they're just going to be there. It's the most efficient way to get transportation to the people around here right now. Like the infrastructure is just set up to be run on oil, and you can't just like switch it. You know, it takes time, and it's a process that goes along with it. So trying to like form a community of people and mindset that is going to go against that idea is going to be very difficult. It's like it's happening, right? And then give it a generation and it'll all be over or whatever. I mean, I would like the idea. I mean, I like running, gas powered vehicles. To me is just fine. I don't need an electric vehicle in my life. It would be nice to have an electric vehicle for running like short distances. But if I'm going to go any kind of long distance, I want gas powered. Losing billions of dollars, people are waking up. You buy a Tesla for 40K and then it breaks. You got to dish out 60K on the battery. 90% of used Teslas are in California. Are people demanding that gas cars be banned? I don't think so. Remember gun buybacks. Don't sell your car or gas appliances. Perfect parking spot for Teslas. All-nighter, put in a good word for me. Laughs. You are an OG. Will do if we see you there. I saw a Tesla blow up in a viral video last week. It was real. I wouldn't doubt it though. If it was real, oh, I see. EV batteries are quite the fire hazard too. Yeah. 3-day fires are cool. Park it in your garage and sleep tight. And are great for roasting marshmallows. Literally huge fire hazard, hard to pass. Hard pass, oh sorry. These are things they can't fix. The cost of these vehicles are too much for the average consumer. especially considering that most people have debt beyond their eyeballs. And I also have to think about, like, the whole idea of owning nothing and be happy, that's really kind of coming to a lot of people out there. Like, somebody asked, like, just the whole idea of, like, people going, like, young kids going and getting a driver's license. Like, I know when I was young, like, I could not wait to get my driver's license. I lived kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and if I wanted to, like, go and visit friends or something, it was like a long walk or riding your bike. But having a vehicle meant, like, man, now I can all of a sudden go and visit people and go and hang out with friends and stuff. So I was super excited about getting a vehicle and having a driver's license and stuff. But that doesn't really necessarily seem to be the case now. And I can understand why. Having a vehicle is expensive, like, especially having a decent vehicle that you're driving around. A lot of money goes out towards the vehicle cost, the insurance cost, fuel cost, everything that goes into it. And so, like, being a kid and, like, having a part-time job or something like that to try and pay for a vehicle, it just gets so expensive that a lot of these kids don't even care, because the ability to get, to commute is so much easier now. Like, like, between Ubers and Lyfts and, all the ride sharing things that are out there, it's like, what's the point of even having a vehicle when you can just get a ride as easy as an app on your phone, right? So I can just kind of see, like, the progression going into, like, owning nothing and be happy is, like, literally something just like that. Owning a car or having a driver's license. It was like, why do it? Like, we used to do it because it was convenient. Now the convenience is right there on an app. It almost done for you. So, all right, cool. How long have we been doing this? Oh my gosh, we've been out here an hour. I was only going to do this for a half an hour, but you know how it is when I get into these live streams. I just can't stop, especially when we got 200 people watching. I mean, my gosh. All right. Let's see here. Cruise down to the bottom here. We got a lot of comments going on. Oh my gosh, look at all these comments. All right, you can look up how much money was printed in the U.S. Treasury in the last decades. You will see that they couldn't reach their 2% inflation target until it benefited the people with checks. Right. Well, and it wasn't just the checks they issued out, because there's been stimulus packages in the past. Like, a lot of people don't even remember. Like, I remember, like, George Bush before Obama went in office was handing out stimulus checks. Right? Does anybody remember those? The George Bush stimulus checks and the Obama stimulus checks. I mean, there was a lot of checks that went out during those times. But it still didn't create the inflation scenario that they were looking for. It's not inflation. Price inflation is one of the most difficult things to try and wrap your head around what causes it to really happen, because it's not just the money printing, right? It's not just the expansion of money. It's so easy to say that, right? And it's really almost to the point of annoying when I hear somebody say, dude, what don't you understand? Money increases, prices go up. Right? I mean, and then it's like, leave it at that. And I'm thinking, okay, that's great to just state it that way, but all the money printing that had taken place during the great financial crisis failed to produce the inflation scenario that the Federal Reserve was looking for. So that little argument just doesn't work, right? So I really have to understand why, because I mean, I was one of them during the great financial crisis when that money printing was taking place, all the quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4. I was definitely one of the people who was screaming hyperinflation scenario coming from this. Like, I thought for sure. It was one of the reasons why I dumped every dime I had into silver. Bought silver all the way up to $50 an ounce, because I thought for sure that we were going to be seeing $500 an ounce silver because of all the money printing that had taken place, all the quantitative easing. It just made so much sense to me, right? And then it didn't happen, right? $50 an ounce silver fell all the way down into the teens. I went completely upside down in my silver holdings, and now I thought, what happened? Right? All that money printing didn't create the hyperinflation scenario that we all knew was going to happen. Old Max Kaiser promising me $500 an ounce silver if I just dreamed about it, right? Pissed me off so bad. And I thought to myself, man, I can't fall for that again. I can't fall for money printing is the reason why it's going to cause inflation, because it didn't happen to me. I had prepared my life for a hyperinflation scenario. It didn't occur. All right. So now I look at things, right? I look at things much differently than what I had done before. And just because that money printer goes off, like the great financial crisis and the quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, doesn't tell me that there is going to be inflation because of that. Right? However, following the lumber industry as closely as I did and saw this massive depletion of inventory that had happened prior to the pandemic and all the money printing that had happened, boom, all of a sudden we got high prices and everybody's pointing at lumber saying, oh, look at what the Federal Reserve did to lumber. And I was one of the few people out there saying, oh yeah, what are you all going to say about those prices of lumber when it goes back down to normal and the Fed still hasn't gone into their quantitative tightening? Because that was the situation that really occurred. I mean, the quantitative tightening came after the lumber prices had already fallen. So all the inflation that was going into lumber and everybody accusing the Federal Reserve of causing lumber prices to go up completely disappeared, gone, vanished, nowhere to be found, right? And yet I understood that. I knew why it was happening. I wasn't claiming the Federal Reserve was causing lumber prices to go up. In fact, I was the one who was saying completely opposite of that. And that it had everything to do with the supply chain breakdown. When the supply came back online, and it came back fairly quickly because it is a domestically made product from our own forests, from our own mills, from our own transportation, from everything that goes on with it is 100% American. It came right back to life, right? That is the reestablishment of the lumber supply chain happened almost instantaneously, right? Prices disappeared and they came back down to normal, and here we are, right? So easy for me to see it, so easy for me to understand that. A lot of people cannot explain what happened to lumber to me. Can't. Like, they cannot tell me why the prices went up, and they cannot explain to me why they have gone back down to normal and have been stabilized. Right? So, I mean, I get it. Like, I understand all that money printing and just the narrative alone being pushed out to people that the Fed did this, right? It is very difficult to wrap your head around anything else that would be the cause of it. I know that, right? I mean, I understand that part of things. So now when I look at, like, it's the supply versus demand. This is really what does it. This is what causes prices to move. Supply and demand, period, right? All the money printing, yeah, that does have its impact, right? Even the severing of the supply chain, that does its too. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a supply and demand issue. Not money printer go burr, prices go up, right? It's supply and demand. That's what does this. So now when you have a lot of increase in consumption, this added consumption then starts to deplete the supply. That supply, if it's not replenished, right, will be out of balance. That supply-demand imbalance causes prices to go up, right? That's what really does it. So if you can add to the consumer with stimulus checks, and you can, diminish the supply by cutting off the distribution network, then you will have prices start to move up. Okay, it's just that is the simplest way to look at it. But just because you had added consumption doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cause the prices to go up. It would initially, but it would be a flash in the pan, as those added consumers only came from a stimulus package, right? So as long as the stimulus is going out, then you would have that added consumer. However, once the stimulus is gone, the consumer is done, then you go back down to equilibrium again. However, if you have a broken supply chain, or you have a supply chain that is not getting investment, right? Because why would you invest into a consumer that is not going to be there? Then the chances of you having the supply come back up to meet the demand is going to be very difficult, and you're going to end up with sticky inflation because of that. I mean, to me, this makes so much sense. Like, I don't question, like, the fact that money printing causes inflation. I mean, I get that part of it, right? What I'm trying to understand is how come it didn't work during quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, and yet it works so well this time, right? And now I get it. I understand it in a much better fashion than I once had. All right, guys, I'm going to give it like another 15 minutes and then I'm going to call it quits because it's Sunday and it's late and and I was only going to be out here for a half an hour. So. All right. I was an Amazon delivery driver and the middle class, upper middle are building everywhere. Maps getting screwed up because these new areas being built aren't on the map yet. Boring. Sorry, Rudy. All right. It's Mexican music and all these new houses being built. Only boring people are bored, Rudy. All right. As a grown-ass man in the apocalypse, how am I supposed to get my eyebrows done up? Huh? Silver won't solve that issue. Okay. All these fake jobs with people working from home. Huh. Something my mom told me a million times. No meat bingo tonight? No, I went and did meat bingo tonight. I just got off about an hour and 15 minutes ago. So, see, constantly work, constantly grinding, man. Every day. Like I did a video earlier today. I go and do bingo. I'm doing another video tonight. It's constant grind. Like, I mean, some people have called me a workaholic or something like that. Whatever. You know, I mean, so be it. If I'm not pursuing excellence, then what the hell am I doing? What am I supposed to be doing? Right? If I'm screwing around and like goofing off and I'm seeking pleasure or something like that, then like I'm wasting time. I mean, it's like I don't have time to do that. Like if I had done the grinding earlier in my life, like when I was in my 20s and 30s, then I would be in a position in which that I could actually do things that would be a little bit more pleasurable and enjoyable. But I just don't have time for that now. Like I screwed that up. Like I screwed up my ability to do that. Like I have to push this stuff out. And, you know, whether or not it's calling bingo or showing up for work the next day or putting out videos, to me, it's a constant grind. I have to be there, you know, doing that. So yeah, I called bingo earlier. And thank you guys for hitting that like button. We up to 211 likes with 214 people watching. I love it when I have just about as many people watching as I do have likes. So very cool of you. Thank you for hitting that like button. All right, then let's see here. Down to the bottom. Oops, where did that go? The nation with the most gold has the most power. Is that why we went on a fiat currency? Yes, I absolutely believe that, Josh. I believe that to be very much the case, in which that when the Federal Reserve had expanded the money supply as much as they had done, right? That had the world convinced at that point that we would be able to provide the world with liquidity, and that liquidity that they were using would be able to be put right back into gold. They had convinced everybody of that. Now, we were in a situation in which that all that gold was about ready to start leaving our nation because the manufacturing was going to start flipping, right? We were a manufacturing base. We distribute more stuff to the world, but then we became a consumer. We started enjoying those higher luxuries. Once we started enjoying those luxuries, the foreign production started coming in, and it started causing the manufacturing base to move. If that was the situation and we allowed it to continue on with the way that things were with the gold standard and everything, we would have exported all our gold out of the nation and we've gone into poverty and misery. I mean, Cantillon explains it pretty well in his essay. Oops, what do I have there? Where is the thing? Yeah, he explains it pretty well in his essay where he talks about how the dive into luxuries, I think it was the second chapter of the increase and decrease of money to the state. And, you know, when you look at that and you think about it, like the increase of the standard of living, right? It's at that point that people really should take caution, Like, even in your own life, like, you can, like, kind of think about this your own self. It's just like, man, I finally got that high-paying job. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to rent that really nice apartment, or I'm going to go out there and I'm going to buy that really nice house, or I'm going to go out there and get that really nice car, or something of that nature. And you increase your standard of living with a higher luxury. What you are doing is you're setting yourself up, right? Setting yourself, like, I'm not trying to tell people how to live by any means, right? But I'm just saying, think about it from the Cantillon's point of view, also from my own experience, in that if you start leveling up on those luxuries, what you are doing is you're positioning yourself that you cannot diminish it, right? So if for whatever reason you have a cut in pay, or for, you can't make as much money or whatever, you can no longer maintain that style of life. Misery and poverty and shit like that starts to follow because of it. So, again, yeah, I agree that the moving away from the gold standard onto a 100% fiat standard was actually saving the United States from falling into a state of poverty. I mean, not saying that that would have been the ultimate outcome, but the people themselves would have had to start working harder for less. And that's not human nature. Like, people don't want to work harder for less. They want to work harder for more. Like, they'll work hard, but they don't want to work hard and then say, hey man, all that doubling of your effort means that you're going to get half of what you would have expected from your efforts. People get frustrated with that and they don't want to participate. That's why it only moves in one direction. The expansion of the money supply, the expansion of luxuries, the expansion of the foreign production coming in, all that stuff is due to the fact that the people themselves have wanted to enjoy their better standard of living due to the increased production that they had done themselves, right? It's a cyclical thing. Like, it's really difficult to imagine yourself saying, okay, I'm going to work really, really, really hard, and then I'm going to not spend this money on any luxuries. I'm only going to buy the bare minimum stuff. I'm going to be as meager as I can with all my possessions, and then I'm going to invest every dime into whatever it is that I feel is most appropriate. If people conducted themselves in that fashion, where they absolutely had the most meager lifestyles they could ever possibly live, and then put all their money into investments, okay, then I can see things might be a little different out there. But that's not the way people operate. Like, it's just not going to happen that way. All right, guys, 5 more minutes. All right. Gosh, look at all these comments. You guys are loving this Sunday evening chat here, the Sunday evening live stream. Maybe we'll make this a regular thing. I mean, to be honest with you, I would have been surprised if I had 100 people out here watching, but having 225, this is awesome. All right, Frank me, what requires you to be on site or in an office in particular for your job to be successful? I'm not sure. Simon, you have to wonder how much longer the Fed can keep firing up the printer, or our digital payments, the printer will forever go burr. Well, okay, Simon, you have to wonder how much longer the Fed can keep firing up the printer, or now we are digital, perhaps the printer will forever go burr. I mean, how long can they go? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe they can go on for the rest of our lives. I mean, I really don't know how long the Federal Reserve can go on for with what they are doing. I mean, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You think, man, this can't go on forever. It's going to fail. They destroyed everything. I mean, I agree with a lot of those statements. I would have been 100% on board with all this, like, hating of the Fed and destroying of the Fed, and the Fed can't last, and they don't know what they're doing kind of thing. I would have been all on board with that, back in like 2015 or something like that. Because that's really the way I felt about it. Seeing things differently now, like, I'm sitting there going, man, it's not the way that I thought it was. And so I have to look at this objectively. Like, can the Federal Reserve continue on forever? Hell, I don't know. I mean, no, because it's a fiat currency. So fiat currencies all fail, all of them eventually. However, we've never had a fiat currency that was based with a digital component to it, like a central bank digital currency being the fiat currency. This is a game changer kind of thing. So can they? I don't know, maybe. I mean, if you can get into the negative interest rates, you could probably go on for a really long time, like forever kind of thing. Is that going to be the case? I don't know, but I mean, I don't look at like, whether or not it's a good or bad thing. I mean, it's just an is, right? And so I have to participate with it as an is. And I'm not reliant on the Federal Reserve, conducting themselves in a way that is going to be most appropriate for me. Like, I got to figure out what they are doing so I can figure out what it is that I'm supposed to do according to their, to what it is that they have going on. People who don't do that are going to end up suffering the consequences. They're the ones who are going to get hurt by the Federal Reserve because they had this belief about the Federal Reserve and the way that they should be conducting themselves or something of that nature. That's like, you can't do that. You gotta it's like almost like looking at the weather. It was just like, man, the weather's really bad. So you probably want to dress appropriately for it, right? You know? I mean, you got to go out there and you got to work. You can't say like I can't work. So you're gonna have to go out there and work in the rain, or you're gonna have to work out there in the cold, or you're gonna have to go out there and deal with it in a way that is most appropriate for you, so you can be, you can conduct yourself. Other people would be like, man, my boss is making me work in the rain. Well, no, he's making you work. The rain just happens to be falling, right? That's the difference. All righty, guys. I'm gonna give it 2 more minutes here, and then we're going to call it quits. Uneducated Economist, do you have viewpoints on people working from home or doing remote homework? I understand it's not acceptable in many circumstances, but it is very successful in others. I'm cool with working at home. I don't understand why that would be a problem. I mean, I kind of do that with my YouTube channel, right? I mean, I could ultimately do everything I need for YouTube from my home, and then I would be working from home if that was like my main source of income. I don't have a problem with people who are working from home. I don't like I know remote workers have screwed things up here in my area because, they have some, high-speed job or something that they can do from their home, and they get paid well to do it, so they come out here to where it's really nice and beautiful and clean and all that other stuff, and buy houses here, and causes the prices to go up, which then in turn kind of creates a gentrification situation in which that the working class then can no longer afford to be here. So I mean, if you're, those are kind of like my thoughts on it, but I don't have a problem with it. Like, that's just the way it is, right? And you got to deal with that. Although I did hear, now that that's brought up, I did hear a couple of property owners, landlords, and I don't think they're legally can do this, but they find out where their tenants are working, and if they don't have like a job here in Astoria, they don't rent the place to them. Basically, like, they try to find out if they're a remote worker or not, and then they won't give them a place to rent. And again, I don't know if that's even legal to do that. So, all right. Here is a fun question for Simon. Perfect. What is one thing that surprised you in the last year in economics? Like, one of the things like I might have gotten wrong, like in a prediction or something like that. I don't know, because like I don't feel like surprised by anything that's happening in the markets. I don't look at like I'm trying to think of like something that kind of came as a shocker that nobody really saw coming, and I don't see that. Like, everybody, like, I was originally under the impression that once interest rates started to move up, then you would find that to be a burden on the home buyer, and then the prices of homes would come down dramatically. But as that started to take place, I quickly changed my view on it. I was like, well, wait a minute now. The prices are not necessarily working against like the interest rate hikes. Like, I understand that in a lot of areas that did, and you'll find like homes prices have fallen in a lot of spots, but it didn't work like in lockstep, right? So none of it really was working in lockstep. Like, the whole housing market itself, like, my view of it is a lot different from other people's, but what I feel had ended up taking place ultimately between the interest rates and the prices is that the interest rates ended up finding their position before the Federal Reserve really started to move with their interest rate hikes, right? So as the Fed started to raise rates, the mortgage rates shot up right away and then found like their level, found their position. That right there, that was not something that I had really expected to take place. As it was happening, that's when my view started to change of it. I'm like, well, wait a minute. The mortgage rates aren't working in lockstep with the Fed. They've moved up. The Fed continues to raise rates, but the mortgage rates are staying somewhat still. So that's when I started to change like the way I was looking at this. It was like, okay, wait a minute. This isn't working like what I thought it was going to. Instead, what I kind of considered was like, okay, so there's not a lot of mortgages out there being written. Well, if there's not a lot of mortgages being written, then the pool of mortgage-backed securities for investors to buy is diminishing. That also now leads to a position in which that the price of it can only go so far down before the investor jumps in, adding support to the mortgage market. Interest rates stop going up, right? And this all happened regardless of what the Federal Reserve was doing. It kind of happened all on its own. So to me, that was kind of a surprise. Like, I didn't expect it to be like that. Now, again, like, I quickly had adjusted the way my prediction on what was taking place with the interest rates hikes moving when I saw the mortgage rates moving up so fast independently of the Fed. And I thought that's when I backed up and I'm like, wait a minute, take another look at this thing because it's not going down the way you thought, you know? So that was one of the surprises. Nothing else really surprises me. Like, you know, the bank term funding program with like Silicon Valley Bank. I knew it was going to come. I didn't know it was going to be Silicon Valley Bank going to do it, but I knew that there was going to be banking issues happening because the Federal Reserve said it was. Like, they basically said, hey, we know that they didn't say it outright. We know that there's banking issues and we have lifeboats to fix it. But they ultimately said they know that there's going to be disruptions within the financial markets and that they have tools that they can deploy. Like, they said it in something like that. Nobody knows what those tools are. Like, nobody knows like exactly what it is that they have planned because it's kind of their secret, you know, so to speak. We know about the stuff that they've already used, but we don't know about the stuff that they can use, right? And that's a major difference to what I think a lot of people looking at the Federal Reserve and studying what the Federal Reserve has done in the past and predicting what it is that they can do in the future. They very rarely take those into consideration, that they have tools that nobody has ever seen or heard of before, right? And they can deploy those things at any given crisis moment or any critical moment that is happening out there. So I don't even like surprising things don't seem that surprising to me. So yeah, over the last year, I guess it would be that, like, you know, the mortgage rates not going the way that a lot of people thought that they were going to when the Fed started raising rates. I don't know. All right, 236 likes with 209 people watching. I love it. We got far more likes than we have people watching, and I love that. Okay, guys, it has been so much fun hanging out here with you, and I would love to stay out here and just keep going. But I got to go home and I got to go to bed because I got to get up in the morning and go to work and grind some more, right? So thank you so much for being here. This was a really, really fun stream. I really enjoyed it. I loved all these questions. And again, if you really enjoyed this live stream, consider joining the channel and participating in some of the member-only live streams. They're just like this, only they're better because I actually read through most of the comments and able to answer all the questions that are being asked out there. And, you know, it's a really good time. I mean, it's just like, you know, it's a tighter, smaller community and, you know, it's just like this. I mean, it's a lot of fun and it's a great time and we cover a lot of information. We get a lot of good viewpoints. We get a lot of like, you know, opinions coming from the comment sections, especially, you know, people who don't agree with me. And that's awesome. You know, I mean, it's okay to not agree with me. And this is what we're doing. We're trying to figure it out so that we can best position ourselves. And I think we're doing it. Like, I think this channel and what it is that we are discussing is a better benefit to the average person than any other economics channel out there. I mean, we're all covering information. We all have our ideas. We all have our own opinions. But this is the one channel that is built by the working class, from the working class, for the working class, of the working class. The rest of these guys, they're all, they're all rich millionaires. Like, they don't relate. They can't, I mean, they relate in a lot of ways because a lot of them had to come from some pretty, low times in order to get to the levels that they are at. But very few of them are showing up every day, going to their 9-to-5 job, trying to figure out what it is that they need to do with themselves in order to best position. And that's where, this community has really come together, All right, guys. All right. You guys are awesome. See you tomorrow. Let's see. Keep warm. All right. Ellen, I live in OK and travel to work and... All right. Good night, everyone. It's been a wonderful, wonderful live stream evening. All right. Good night. Oh, I should do this right. Uneducated Economist. You let me know.